G'day guys, and welcome back to episode of our Kart Class Podcast. Today we're going to be looking at developing smooth drivers. So whether that's the throttle, the brake, and the steering fundamentals. We've been told thousands of times that, smooth is fast, and it's really evident when it comes to kart racing. Now, for kart racing, we don't have the acceleration of a racing car. We don't have a diff like a racing car. We don't have suspension like a racing car. So a lot of what happens in our steering wheel is how the weight transfers, is how the kart grips, is how the kart accelerates out of the turns. So we've really got to be super critical on how much we're turning the wheel to get the most amount of speed around the corners. Hugely important when it comes to cadets. Like again, very, very overgrip tyre for the amount of power they've got. So you're going to tend to see that the kids at the front, you can hardly see their hands moving. It's really just their fingers basically steering the kart. Now, when it comes to some of the things that we can look for or try and enhance our steering inputs, we're seeing a lot more now about the steering angle. So people are tending to use now an angled steering boss. And what that's doing is it's actually bringing the steering wheel closer. It's actually tilting it to be more vertical. It's actually like a racing sim or like a car. Now, rather than when I was driving, I didn't know any different. So basically I had to just work with what I've got. And that's how karts have been produced for a number of years. But the steering wheels were tilted a lot more towards the front of the kart. So it was a bit more like a bus, as an example. Now what happens is you've got a little bit less feel like that. And there's a little bit more movement when it comes to steering around the corners. And I had to just try and perfect, or we all had to try and perfect our steering inputs around that steering angle. Now with a super grippy tyre, it's actually hard to hold the steering lock when the steering wheel is more tilted towards the front of the go-kart. You really can't try and hold that steering with the amount of grip that these tyres have unless you have more steering angle. And what you'll notice now on the grid is some of the other karts around you, especially towards the front of the field, you're going to say, holy cow, their steering wheels are literally almost vertical. They're really upright. And what that's doing is it's allowing the driver to basically hold their arms a lot straighter. When we've got straighter arms, it's a lot easier to control the steering. If I see drivers with a bad posture in the kart, so basically they've got a bit of a hunchback, what tends to happen is there's a bit more of a V in their arms when they're holding the wheel. Now, some people can control that, no dramas, because that's just what they're used to and that's their driving style. But the more of a V that you have, or the more of a bend in your arms when you're steering, it's a lot harder to be precise because there's just more leverage for you to basically turn the wheel. And now we're talking about trying to minimize the amount of steering input that you put around a corner. So with a more upright wheel, we're basically trying to push ourselves back into the steering wheel, back into the seat, and get our arms a lot straighter for when we're cornering. Straighter arms, less input, more control. So I would be trying to, if you are noticing that your driver is getting a little bit erratic out there and they don't have an angled steering boss, try and get one or try one to see whether your driver likes it. Obviously, if they've been driving for quite some time, the first couple of sessions might be a little bit to get used to. But once they realize the feel coming back through the steering and their arms, it should actually take away a bit of forearm pump as well. If you notice that some of your kids are saying, "Far out, my arms are getting quite sore," it's like the more that it's tilted forward, it's actually using a lot of your forearms when you turn the corners. And then obviously when you turn the wheel back, you're using a bit more of your wrist or even your upper body a little bit more. So just try that when it comes to developing, a smooth driver. We want to try and make sure that our steering angle is more tilted upwards, that our arms are a lot straighter when we're actually cornering, so that we are smoother generally. And that's going to keep us, like I've been coaching some people during this week, and when you opposite lock through a corner, obviously you're losing traction, but you can't go any faster. Like you've gone too fast, you've lost control, and that's the speed. You're actually going to be losing speed as you're going around the corner. Rather than a smoother entry, you can actually start to accelerate earlier or just carry more momentum through the turn. Then when it comes back to the very start of this podcast about saying that, we don't have suspension and we don't have all these things that a car does, when you're holding the wheel precisely through a corner, that's going to transfer the weight to the outside of the kart. So if you're turning a right-hand hairpin, so as your right hand is actually turning, your left arm is pushing into the steering wheel, and that's creating like a straighter arm, the inside tyre is going to lift, the inside rear tyre is going to lift off the ground a lot easier. It's a lot easier to demonstrate or show when I'm at the track with someone. I can get them sitting in the go-kart themselves, even a senior driver, just say 160 kilos on the grid, just sitting there. If they just turn the wheel from, say, 12 o'clock being straight to even just 11 o'clock, don't need to turn the wheel very much, I can lift their inside tyre off the ground. If you put it back to 12 o'clock, quite difficult. That's lifting the 160 kilos again. And if you just put it to not even 1 o'clock, like there's a little bit of oversteer, just put it just a little bit past 12, that now transfers the weight to the opposite side, and it's near on impossible to lift that inside rear tyre. So when a lot of people are like, oh, my kart won't jack and it won't do this and the setup's wrong, it's mainly coming from your steering wheel. It's how your driver is actually turning the kart around the corner and when they're applying that lock and how much lock they're applying. If you turn too much and you have to get out of it and go again, well, that's going to just transfer that weight multiple times. And your kart will lift, drop, and the kart will actually start to bounce. Now, when I've won my races back in the day, we tended to never run caster because it was just something that I found slowed the kart down. But I was able to get that kart to lift the inside tyre just enough to make it release off the corners by steering it really well. Where other people may have been having some smaller mistakes or some deficiencies with their driving, they manually needed to make that happen. And now, so the problem was they're sort of masking some of their mistakes. So when they actually drive it all right, I felt the cast was actually binding their karts up more than what my kart was. So that's what we're seeing a lot now with even in cadets. Very hard to transfer the weight with a smaller driver, less body mass, smaller center of gravity, is that we're having to, potentially mechanically put in some caster, which is fine. But some kids having to put in, say, full caster when the track's basically dry, they're running like almost a wet setup in the front because they're not steering it that well. So we're having to manually get that inside rear wheel to lift to release out of the corners. So then what you're finding is the smoother drivers run a little bit less caster, they're driving it better, and they're getting more release out of the corners, and they're faster. They're running a less sprocket because they've got more release, carrying more momentum through the turns, so they're fast on the straights and fast on the corners, and that's why you can't keep up. A lot of information. I suppose the key tips are check your steering angle, make sure you don't have much of a V when you're sitting in the kart. Try and get that posture pretty straight. Keep your arms, relatively straight. Holding that steering lock around the corner, just a little bit of input the whole way around is going to help lift that inside rear tyre. It's going to help your kart release out of the turns. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please just try and share it around. I don't know how it works for other parents, but podcasts are pretty easy to listen to on the way to the track. So hopefully this advice can help you out on the way to the track next time you're heading out there. Cheers, and I'll speak to you guys soon.